You're listening to She's a Business podcast. Today we're talking about the unique strengths that you may not realize you've developed over your time in your corporate career that you can now leverage as an entrepreneur to help your business grow and thrive and be flexible in your own way. Stay tuned. This episode is coming right up.
Hi, I'm your host, Jessica Osborne, and over the last 25 years in marketing and business, I've helped many brands to launch, scale, and grow, with some of them becoming multi-billion-dollar companies. I'm here to inspire you to get out of your own way and create a profitable, fulfilling business while living the lifestyle you really desire, without all the hustle. So I bring you She's the Business podcast, a unique blend of strategies, tactics, mindset, health, and spirituality, literally everything you need to be the successful leader of your dream business. Made by women, for women, this is your weekly dose of motivation and inspiration.
Many women leave their corporate jobs around the time of starting a family because they want more flexibility, time, and just the ability to really make those decisions in your own life, like being able to take days to go to the school sports carnival and things like that. You can hear in my voice today, it's a little bit worn, and that's because I was leading our surf lifesaving group yesterday at my children's nippers event in the morning, and I overused my voice. So I apologize in advance for the slight croakiness that you're hearing today. But we're here to talk about what this really means and the leadership qualities that you're bringing that you may not even know exist within you from your time in your corporate job into entrepreneurship. Maybe you've been in business for many years. Maybe you're still in corporate and you're really wanting to start. But today's discussion is going to help you understand a bit more about what you already have that are core strengths within you that can help you to make your business thrive. My very special guest today is Ros Cardinal. She's an organizational development consultant, an executive coach, and the creator of the Women's Leader Archetypes model that she's now shared in over 98 countries around the world. And she's sharing these leader archetypes with us today. So interesting because there are 4 shadow archetypes and 4 empowered archetypes. And not to spill the beans on it all right away, but you likely have a mix of all 8 within you. The key is knowing which are your leading ones, which are the main ones, the prominent ones that are driving your daily decisions and how you're leading within your business or maybe even in your job. So we are going to chat everything from the journey, leaving corporate, what it means, why we do it, the challenges, the opportunities that are there for you. And then we also talk about the archetypes so you can help to recognize which ones are showing up for you in your life. Ros is absolutely lovely. I know you're going to love her as much as I did. She's known as a strategist, an alchemist, and unapologetic diagnostics nerd because she blends neuroscience, leadership, and the archetypes together to turn something that's quite complex into something really simple and easy for any of us to understand and know more about ourselves. Isn't that fun? So without further ado, let me introduce Ros to you and start this whole conversation. Enjoy. Hello. So I'm here with Ros Cardinal, the founder of Shaping Change, who's joining me, another Australian from Hobart, Tasmania. Welcome, Ros. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me on. Really happy to be here and have a chat.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn more about the leadership archetypes that you've developed for women. But before we get into all of that and talk about, the huge changes I think that happen when we leave a corporate career, come into entrepreneurship, I think you and I both have a lot in common we can chat about there. But please tell us a bit more, first of all, just about exactly who you help, what do you do, what is Shaping Change all about?
I've actually got almost like 2 businesses now. So Shaping Change, entrepreneurs never stop, do we?
Why not? Why not have another one?
Why not have another one? 2 or 3 or 5. I started Shaping Change. So my background is in human resources originally and then organisational development. And I had I think I was about 8 years as the organisational development manager for a company down here. And so leaving leaving that and starting my own thing, it was natural to go into OD. So OD consulting, facilitation, coaching, all of those sorts of things that go with it. So OD is a really fun portfolio to play with because you get to do strategy, you get to do organisational culture, you get to do the really interesting big pieces of work that happen in organisations. So that's the consulting arm of the business. Executive coaching is part of that. And then when I developed the archetypes, I'll talk about that. We can talk about that a bit later. But part of that in the last few years has been around accrediting other female coaches to use the model and the tools in their practices. So that's the second business, if that.
Excellent.
Off the corner of the desk project, which is starting to take over now. So it's one of those kind of things where I'm balancing the two of them quite well at the moment. You know, the focus on the consulting part of it and also the focus on the developing and growing coaches. And I found the really fun part about that is supporting the women as they build their own businesses around using the tools. So I'm really enjoying, again, it's still the same sort of work, you know, strategy,
of course,
the culture piece, the how do you actually, you know, create your own business. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think that the interesting part of that to me is, you know, obviously with the archetypes, although you're supporting coaches, it's really the purpose and the mission behind it obviously is a focus on women, you know, learning how to be better leaders, being able to step into the shoes and overcome some of the challenges that we face when leaving a corporate career and then moving into entrepreneurship. Because even though you might do the same thing, and, you know, technically I did that, I sort of shifted my skill from what I did in my corporate life. I had been head of marketing communications, and I'm like, I can do the same thing for other businesses, you know, advise them and mentor them to do their marketing. So it wasn't a lot of real difference, but there is so much difference. Like it's a world of difference when you're in your own business. But let's start with, you know, I guess if you want to tell us a bit about why, you know, what caused you to want to focus on this particular area and to develop even having the archetypes in the first place. Where did you come from with that?
So that goes back to me always, you know, when I think back on my career, I've always been a champion for women at work. I remember creating the very first part-time position for a woman coming back from maternity leave in the public service, and that was back in the late 1980s. Never been done before. It was really hard to push that through, but we got that up and running because I had an amazing woman working for me who took mat leave. Her marriage broke down. She had to come back to work. You know, back in those days in the late 80s, you know, you had a choice. You know, you came back if you wanted to, but you didn't have to like you do these days. And so that sort of, you know, looking at my whole career, there's been that thread moving through it. And then I worked in energy, which is a very male-dominated industry. My daughter's an engineer. I've done some, you know, projects around women in leadership for Engineers Australia, for the Australian Computer Society, around how do we bring more women in. And so I've always had this sort of thread running through my career, I guess. And then it sort of started to solidify for me a bit more probably a couple of years into my business when I started to really reflect on the fact that I had women coming to me for coaching who were wanting to do something else. They were this sort of, you know, I've got to a certain level in corporate or in government. I'm at probably the level below executive, you know, or middle level management. And I've just realised that I just don't want to be here anymore. Like, I don't know why, because I've been really ambitious and I've been really focused on my career all my life, but things have shifted for me and I don't really see myself wanting that world, the executive world. Like when I look at climbing the ladder further, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to work those crazy hours and never see my kids and have the expectations that go with it. And so they were going, you know, what do I do next? Like they were sort of hitting this almost like a midlife crisis because you know, some of them are a lot younger than that. But it really was this crisis of what do I do with myself? I thought I had this career trajectory and now I don't have it anymore. So what do I do next? And so that sort of got me thinking about what is it that's gone wrong with workplaces, or not even gone wrong, what was wrong to start with that means that it's not accommodating for women and that so many talented women were opting out of businesses rather than staying in and going on to do amazing things, like they were heading off to not-for-profits or charities or starting their own businesses and doing amazing things somewhere else. But for me, there's this sense of like what is it about the corporate world that sort of almost rejects them when they get to that point? And so I started reaching out to women on LinkedIn, to just sort of people that I knew, to say, look, I'd like to have a chat about women in leadership. I'm thinking about, you know, I didn't even know what I was thinking about at this stage. I think I was probably in this sort of, I just want to talk to women and find out what their experiences are because I'm hearing it from coaching clients, but I want a bigger range of women to talk to. I ended up with 538 women from around the world who contributed to focus groups. They did interviews with me. They filled out forms. They did surveys. I pestered them a lot. It was all very low tech. I'd sort of send them a PDF and they'd fill it out by hand and scan it and send it back, and I'd add it all up, manually and put it into a spreadsheet. But I started gathering this really interesting narrative around how women, when we're left to our own devices outside of the corporate structure, we lead differently. And I know that all women will hear that and go, well, duh. We all know we lead differently from men.
Absolutely.
But this was this, how do we actually define what that looks like? Like, we know we lead differently from men, so what does it actually look like? And it ended up being a model which really articulates women's leadership. And it's not necessarily in business leadership either. It's, women can be leaders in the community or in their small businesses or whatever it is they're doing. But really this definition of what does it actually look like to be a woman in leadership. And then mapping that back to, because I'm accredited in over 25 different psychometrics because I'm a diagnostics nerd, mapping it back to all the theories that I knew and all of the leadership diagnostics that I already had in my toolkit. Yeah. And recognising that what we were using to measure women was that male construct of leadership, which meant that women moving into leadership, that's why they felt so out of place in that hierarchy. They were moving into the more senior roles and being told this is what you need to do if you want to be a leader around here. And it wasn't fitting with their natural style. So, you get that for all women, that sort of space where they're either too much or not enough. You get told that you're too bossy, you're too opinionated, you're too loud, you're too bossy, you're too much. Or you'll never be a leader because you're not enough of those things. You can never find the sweet spot.
Yes.
And that was the frustration, is why is it that women are being told that they're always too much or not enough? Like, why is there no space for us at the table?
Yes.
And there's not to say that women haven't done that. They've been at the top table and done it successfully, but they always find there's a sacrifice. So I've had women say to me things like, I had a client who had to take up golf because the rest of the exec played golf on Saturday. And she said, if I don't go, they make all these decisions about it. So I'm not there and I don't hear about it.
Well, golf is a much easier thing to do. Just a story of one of the businesses that I was in previously, and at that head level, this is the IT industry. They used to go to strip clubs, no joke, and have meetings there, and even with clients. And I just was like, this is not okay. I am not comfortable doing that. Yeah. And that was just that's what they did. So it was very much a boys' club, and you're very much on the outer. Like, we did not belong. I had that. Did not belong
exact there. Thing. I remember going to a conference with, the men, and when they had a lunch break, and it was a long enough lunch break, you could go out and get food, and they wanted to go to a strip club, and they were like, well, if you're not coming with us, we're going anyway. Yes. And I went somewhere else. But it's like, how is that okay?
It boggled my mind. I actually thought, you cannot be joking. I thought this just happened in the movies and that they were exaggerating to make it, more interesting to watch. But it is actually what has been going on. And, it really did open my eyes up so much once I got it to that level and really saw what it was like. And it's really poor, disappointing, I think, to be honest.
And so really good women were opting out and going somewhere else because they didn't want to have that life. Even, you don't have to play golf or go to a strip club. There's the long hours, there's the expectations, there's the needing to be on 24/7. You can't ever get away from work. And, women are saying, look, I've got a family. I experienced it myself. I mean, that was one of the catalysts for me leaving was I was running a business-wide culture change program. It went for 5 years, and we had residentials twice a week. I didn't facilitate all of them. I facilitated once a week. So I was away from home for 2 nights once a week. And I remember going home and my daughter turned to my son. They were probably mid-teens. And she said, who's this woman and why does she seem to think that she lives here?
Oh,
and,
ouch.
Yeah, ouch, big ouch. But that was what I was hearing reflected from my female clients is,
yes.
I don't want that world anymore. I've either tried it out and don't want it, or I'm looking at it and going, the only women I've seen succeed are the ones who have been prepared to sacrifice something in order to be successful.
Yeah.
And so that was the catalyst for this whole project. And then we released the first version of the assessment tool, and we've had over 10,000 women take it now in 98 countries. So it's got this wonderful database now of, women at their best essentially. And so now we have a benchmark. So when we're assessing a woman, you can see a benchmark against other women as opposed to against men, which is what traditional leadership diagnostics do. Because let's face it, most of the people in the database are men. So
Yeah.
That's what I love about it, is it's defined leadership for women, but also being able to benchmark against female leadership.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And shaping change, just like that really says it all, because this is a real driver of change. I'm curious because I'm sitting there listening to you, obviously relating everything to my own personal experience. And for me, and I'm curious as to whether you see a trend, and if there's with families and starting a family, is it when they're first starting a family? Is it they've started a family and they're back in the workforce and then they're thinking, this isn't the place for me? I'm interested to hear about that, because my own experience, everything changed literally the moment I told them I was pregnant. So what I saw in the corporate world was, you're an A player, everything is fine as long as you are a woman with no children, or you're a woman with grown-up children and you're able to be back in the workforce and you have like no responsibility and no need to be around them. But if you're anywhere in the place of you have children, whether they're babies, young, or at school, and there's still some level of responsibility there, it is just not for you. And I was literally told to my face by the CEO when I said I'm pregnant, and I waited till I was 5 months, and I literally had to say something because otherwise, I was starting to show and everything. But he said, "Don't worry, there'll be a job for you when you get back." And I looked at him and said, "What do you mean? I am coming back to my job, the one that I have worked my butt off for. Like, I haven't been doing this for 20 years to just go away and that's it. Oh, well, now I'm a mum and now it doesn't matter." And he looked at me and laughed and said, "Oh, your priorities will have changed." Literally what he said. So I didn't get a choice to say what I wanted or where my, anything about it. I was put in a box immediately and labeled, and how I was treated at work changed from that moment. There was like a line had been drawn, and from then on, I was then treated differently, even though I had not acted any differently. And until that moment, he hadn't known I was pregnant. So he'd been treating me the same as he always had right up until then. And, and it changed the minute I said it. And that is, I'm sure I'm not unique in this experience. I did go back after that first baby and, I thought I've got a point to prove here. And so I went back and was proving the point. And then when I got pregnant with the second child, I just thought, that's it. I literally cannot see this future being here, not only because it's not an environment that was supportive or conducive to women even recognizing achievements and ability, because as soon as you have the mother and any form of part-time, they just think you're slacking off. And it's like, I'm doing my full-time job in part-time hours now. You're paying me less and I'm actually improving results. That was never mentioned. So, it was so interesting. So for me, it happened early on. My second baby, I had a 3-year-old at home and I was out. But for others like yourself, you had teenagers. So I'm curious, do you see a trend, and is that the primary driver that women are leaving corporate because of having babies and family, or is there something else that happens?
It's quite often is families. And I mean, I mentioned a project I did for Engineers Australia, and that was around exactly that. They found that women were leaving the profession to have their babies and never going back, because there was this perception in the industry that you couldn't be a mother and an engineer at the same time. And so they were part of this project about how do we arrest that? How do we actually change the perceptions in the whole industry so that we can bring women back? And look, I had a female client who was an engineer who went part-time after she had her kids, and she intended to be part-time for a couple of years and then go back full-time. They wouldn't let her. And every time she sort of said, look, I'd like to change to full-time, the CEO kept saying, but who's going to look after your kids? This job involves a lot of travel. And she's like, my husband's a teacher. He gets lots of free time.
Let me handle that.
They wouldn't. So she ended up leaving and going somewhere else. And then, I helped her exit. And then when she was handed in her resignation, she got the typical thing, what can we do to help you stay? And she'd been screaming about what she needed for years and not being listened to. But then when they, she did that, I'm leaving now, they go, oh, so what can we do? But what I am seeing is, for women, it's often they leave around the time, they have young children and they've realised that they're balancing it quite well now in that middle-level manager job, but they're looking above it and going, I can't climb the ladder any further because I don't want to have to make the choice. I was in a situation with my, teenage kids where I had put my career on hold. I mean, I went back to work when my kids started at school. I'd gone back part-time before that, but I went full-time once they started school. But my career was on hold. I was basically went back in, to a much lower level job than I'd left on.
Right.
And that was really for me about how do I just have a job that's I can do without really putting too much thought into it. I can really just, focus, because I was a single mum too, so I needed to focus on my kids. But I had to make the choice. It was the choice between and of course, once my kids got a bit older, I accelerated my career again and picked it back up. And that's why I ended up at that sort of teenage level where I just went, what am I doing? And, I got cancer as well. That's a whole different story. But the whole thing around just realising it wasn't working for me. I didn't want the expectations and the idea that, you're blocked in your career because the only way you can be really successful is if you are prepared to give it, everything, give it your everything. And even men, when you talk to men about it, I remember inviting a male departmental secretary to talk to a group of women. I was doing a women's leadership program, and they were all sort of middle-level government. And someone said to him, so what advice do you have for us? And he said, get yourself a wife. I've got one. They're amazing. And he said, honestly, that's the way I've had a great career, is because my wife has done everything for me. She's managed the house, managed the kids, paid the bills, booked the holidays, booked my doctor's appointments. So I've been able to 100% focus on my career.
Yeah.
And even looking at that, it's so sad. Like, why is it we've created a monster that means that people, I'm not just talking women, but people have to choose between their families and their work career. We shouldn't have to do that. We should be able to do both.
That's exactly it. And that's what I felt as well. I thought, well, no one's making this happen. I'm going to make it happen for myself. That was why I left. I thought, stuff this. I'm going to have my cake and eat it too. But, you bring up such an interesting point, because there is this belief then, and this is common, that it only works if you have a wife. And so here are the men saying, well, I want these execs in the team because they have a wife at home who's looking after everything else. And the interesting thing I found was my best employees in my team were my part-time working mums. They were the most efficient, the most effective, produced the most. They actually produced more and got more done. And some of them, they weren't just workers, they were managers, at senior levels, and they were so much more effective, even though they weren't technically there every day, 9 to 5. But yet the office would always put people up on a pedestal if they were in the office for more hours. I'm thinking, well, you don't even know what they're doing. They're spending like hours chatting at the water cooler, and they're off on eBay, on their web, on their computers. And, it doesn't matter how long you're in the office for. That doesn't make them a good worker. That just means that they've got nothing else going on in their life. And I just found it really curious that there is this perception, but it's so widespread and it's almost automatic, like subconscious. I don't think that a lot of people even realize that they think that way. I think they think, oh no, I'm very family friendly, and we, there's the corporate line, like we're family friendly and we offer flexible working, but then they don't see that they apply that differently inside.
And that's an interesting point, because as you would be aware, there's research going on at the moment into the idea of a 4-day working week, which is where people have the 5-day, the productivity remains the same. You're still producing what you were on a 5-day working week, but you only work 4 days. And the companies that have adopted it, most of them are keeping it. They adopted it as a trial or a pilot, and they're keeping it. What they found is that people are just as productive in 4 days a week, and the reason for that and why it works for part-timers is because you're very aware that you've only got a limited amount of time. So all the filler stuff goes away. You don't have those water cooler chats and the long lunches and I'll just, take a break for a minute and sort of, just fiddle about on the internet because I can. And so people become incredibly productive. So what they found is that productivity actually goes up. People are happier and less stressed because they get a 3-day weekend.
Yes.
You've got your Friday or your Monday to kind of go and do your banking and your hairdressing and all the things that you do normally squeeze into a weekend, which means people are finally getting to really So it's, again, this is not a male-female thing. This is a human thing. Like, we've just created these workplaces that don't work for humans in general. We've dehumanized the workplace. And it goes back, obviously, Industrial Revolution, where we just all cogs in a machine. We weren't thinking about how do we make this people-friendly. It was just how do we make it as efficient and
productive,
make as much money as possible. Productivity and efficiency. But people are a lot more productive when they know they've got a limited time. So I find that with women that I coach who are part-time, they're like, they generally are churning out 5 days worth of work but only getting paid for 4 days, which feels a bit unfair.
Yes, it does. And, when you think about it, when you've got the limited time, you're not doing the stuff that's unimportant. you're going, right, I've got this amount of time. What are the top things I need to get done? And it means that instead of wasting time doing some of these activities like, oh, I'm going to sit here and shuffle through these things or empty my inbox, it's like, well, is that really going to change anything at the end of the day or not? And so you're choosing the high impact activities and what you actually need to get done that's going to shift things forward, which means that the results are much higher because you have got that focus on time. Totally agree. It's amazing. What are, when we're looking at women who are leaving corporate and heading into entrepreneurship, what are some of the, I'd say, unique strengths that they are bringing from their experience into entrepreneurship?
One of the big things that I see women doing really well is they're very adaptable. So it is this sort of sense that they go into entrepreneurship usually they go in with a relatively good idea of what they're going to face. This idea that you do have to wear every single hat in your business. You've got to, you think about your traditional org chart. All of those have got your name on them now. You're the CEO, you're the CFO, you're the CMO, you're the chief. You've got to work your own IT, all of those sorts of things. So I think women bring that flexibility and that adaptability to it, and also the that sort of sense of purpose and sense of values that you really see in women. And that's one of the things that came out in this model that I created was this real connection to purpose. Like when women are aligned with purpose, they do amazing things in the world. I've worked with women who've started charities to address things that they've seen it. Usually it's out of their own personal experience. They've gone, this support wasn't there for me when I needed it, so I'm going to make sure that no other women have to go through that. And they start charities and, start creating amazing events around the world and things like that because of this drive, this purpose. And I think that's something that women are very good at, is this sense of purpose being bigger than us, this idea that we're doing this for the future, we're doing this for our children, for our communities, for the bigger picture rather than it being self-centric.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And what would you say are the biggest challenges? Because interesting, you say we kind of get the view on what are all the different hats that are required to run a business. But in the corporate world, you're not usually wearing all the hats. You have someone in finance doing the finance stuff, and you've got somebody in all of those almost really supporting you. And, it can also then be a challenge to find, well, oh, goodness, now I need to know these things and now I need to do that as well as doing, whatever it was that you used to. What other challenges do you think that people face when they make the shift?
It can be a lonely place unless you find your tribe fairly quickly. There's certainly plenty of women in business groups around, and I'd always encourage women to join those if you're going to leave and start your own business, join those networking groups, not just for the sake of networking, but just because you're going to need other people, because otherwise you're sitting at your own, on your own in your home office, for example.
Exactly. Thinking what's wrong with me. And then you can go on there and think, oh, actually, there's all these other people feeling the exact same and, going through the same thing you are. It makes you feel like, you're not alone and it's all very normal. But yeah, I agree.
And also having almost like a board of directors in a way. Like when I first left to start my business, I had a really good financial planner. I had a good accountant. I had a good lawyer that I could sort of turn to sort of go, in terms of things like business structure, like how do I set this up? How do I protect my intellectual property? That sort of thing. And so it could be a range of people that you have, experts in their fields that you can turn to when you need things. So it's setting that sort of structure up because I've seen people who've started a business and they keep all their receipts in a shoebox for the whole year and then they give it all to an accountant at the end of the year and go, sort it out, and they've got no idea if they're making a profit or not. It's like they send out invoices and print off a copy and stick it in the shoebox, and that all gets delivered at the end of financial year. So it's like have a really good, almost like those people that you would normally have relied on in corporate. like your finance people, your IT people.
Yeah.
Find those contractors who are going to be really good at that for you.
Yes.
And set that up early because you're going to need them. You might not think you do, but you're going to need them, and it's better to set it up well from the beginning. Like with my accountant, we sat down and went, do I become a company straight away or am I a sole trader? And he said, look, let's sole trader it for a little bit and we'll see how things go. And if you get to this size, we'll start, turn into a company, which we did. So that sort of stuff can be invaluable because you don't want to, one of the things I see people doing is they leave decisions like that too late. Sort of like I don't know when to become a company or I haven't got my insurance sorted out or I've got my receipts in a shoebox and I have no idea whether I'm making money. It's that kind of thing. You had all of those support structures in corporate. It's about setting all of those up, in your own small business.
Yeah, absolutely. And, asking ChatGPT or Google or even in a Facebook group, so many people kind of reach out and ask those sort of questions. And you think you just got to be really wary of what sort of advice you're getting. So much better. You don't have to have an accountant on staff or a lawyer on staff. You just need to have someone who you've chosen, who's obviously a good fit for your business, and that you can get that advice, whether it's an hour, sit down with them for an hour and pay them for that hour. But it's so invaluable to have that. Absolutely. What else do you see, because I know that your archetypes, I'd love to get into those now, what the leader archetypes are. Are there any other sort of challenges around leadership that you see women particularly face when they obviously becoming your own boss? You are instantly thrust into leadership, even though you may be a business of one and wearing all the hats. You are still the person leading your business, and there are the leadership qualities required, even if you don't have a technical team per se.
And look, one of the things that often happens when you leave, your corporate world, whether you did it yourself or you're pushed, because that often happens for women. Sometimes they get pushed, and it's things no longer tenable, or they get made redundant or something like that. Is there's often starting from a place of fear, which is I've been thrust into this thing, or I've made the leap myself, but it's a really scary thing. And I mean, I know I felt that when I left. It was this thing of, I had to work my 6 months notice period. So there was this 6 months where I spent the whole time sort of going backwards and forwards between, yes, this is going to be awesome, to, oh my God, I've made a huge mistake. How do I walk this back? And so starting from this space of fear is the challenge, because then we are not operating our best. We're not making great decisions. We're operating from, in my model, we're operating from shadow archetypes, which are the ones that are protective. They're protecting us from threat. And so our world narrows rather than expand. Yeah. And it's that real sense that we're doing this because we feel driven to make a certain amount of money. We put a success label on it. It's got to look like this to be successful. And we drive ourselves really hard to meet that definition of success, which might not be the right one. And particularly if we haven't really planned it well, and, we haven't allowed for the fact that, the first few years are pretty bumpy, You're going to have times when you're sitting there and there's no clients on the horizon and you're going to be, oh, my God, what am I doing? I need to go back to the job. But knowing that you can trust the process and work your way through it, it's that sort of sense of how do you operate in that empowered space rather than that shadow space.
Yeah, I think, and everybody's well written about that women often undersell themselves or underrate themselves and their ability. And I even see now that on a lot of job ads, they will say, even if you only think you meet a few of these criteria, please still apply, because, women would feel like they had to smash every single one of the requirements before they could apply, whereas men tended to act quite differently and would apply if they even met one of the criteria. So the interesting thing with that is then if they get pushed out, get made redundant because of their, they're having a family or they want to work part-time and then the company won't allow them to, and they sort of get pushed out or demoted or made part-time and they leave on those terms, confidence absolutely shattered. Like the small amount of confidence in themselves that they had before, because they usually would be underrating how great they really were, then is diminished even further. So talk to me about the archetypes. Now, you've mentioned there are shadow archetypes, and then obviously there are the positive ones as well. Where would you like to begin in
I think I'll talk about the shadows first, because this is relevant to what we're talking about. This sense that, if you're leaving and you've got no confidence, you personalize everything, which is this sense of I'm not getting clients because I've done something wrong, or there's something that I'm doing that's causing this situation. I mean, rather than going, this is just what all startups go through.
Yeah.
Everybody goes through this phase of where you've got to go out there and find the clients, they don't just fall into your lap. So the shadow archetypes are around, what happens for women when we're not at our best. And they're driven by fear, they're driven by threat response. It's the normal response that humans have to threat. So we've got our tyrant archetype, which is the one that's, drives herself really hard. It's perfectionism, it's imposter syndrome. It's I have to prove myself, I have to prove my value. And if I'm not doing more than enough, it's like that, I've got to do more all the time because I don't feel like I'm enough or I'm doing enough. And so they're, in a business, when they start their business, they'll work themselves into the ground. They work a lot more hours than they would in their corporate job. They burn themselves out really quickly because they're trying really hard, because they feel like I just need to do more and I'll be successful. And the reason my business isn't successful is because I'm not doing enough. And of course, their standard of success is really high. And so they're never going to be able to meet that. And then they always feel like they're losing. They always feel like they're failing.
Yeah.
And then we've got a lone wolf archetype, which is around, influence and power. But what happens there is a woman decides she has to do it all herself because it's the only safe way to do it. I can't trust anybody but myself. I'm the only one I can trust to do this. So she won't seek help. She won't reach out to the expert. She won't bring a new person in. She won't employ a VA when the time comes when she actually needs some support, because there's this sense of I can't let go of it all because it belongs to me. It's all mine. And if I let go of the control, then I've got to fail.
Yeah.
So I can't
Is
trust
that when they say like my business is my baby, and they're literally like nurturing it to that point where I can't let anyone else in because it's my baby.
Yeah. And it becomes a very lonely world. And also very limiting because there's only so much one person can do.
Absolutely.
And they never expand beyond that sort of early self, almost like that startup stage, because you start to get to a point where you do need other people. You start to need to employ an office manager, and you need to employ somebody to do your graphic design, but because they want to control everything, they won't. You've got your martyr archetype, which is the people pleaser, which is where in business she worries so much about what people think about. They've got to like me. And that's where you get that people pleasing thing of, not setting reasonable prices. But they'll decide on a product or a service, and then they'll go, but I can't charge that much for it. And even though I had this conversation with a woman who was leaving corporate just recently, and she said, I've been a purchaser of my own services, and I know how much I was paying to buy those services when I was in corporate. But when I think about asking for that much money, I feel sick. Because it's this thing of I've got to make sure that I'm agreeable to everybody, which means not sitting, like undervaluing everything they do, doing too much for nothing. They fall into the trap of scope creep, where they've agreed on a price for a piece of work, and then the client keeps adding more and more and more, and they just keep doing it for nothing until they're working for hardly anything. And then you've got the hermit archetype, which is where we withdraw when things are really not going well, into our hermit cave, and we procrastinate, we avoid, we stop. And you see women doing that in their business. They've announced they've started a business, and 2 years in, they've not actually done anything because, there's other things to do, like cleaning the house and, going to the shops and, and that kind of thing. And it's an avoidance tactic. It's, I even see women, procrastinate cleaning. It's like, I remember a quote from an author, and I can't remember who it was now. It's one of the authors from years ago, who was asked, what do you do when you have to write a novel? What's the first step? And he said, first of all, you clean out the refrigerator. Because
it'll be on your mind.
Exactly. So that's the shadow archetypes. Is this sort of these are the ones that really sabotage us, because we're operating out of fear. And if we're not aware of this side of ourselves, it's really easy to get stuck in it. And then, we burn ourselves out. The tyrant will burn out. The martyr burns out in a different way because she gives too much and she ends up, potentially going blind. And the hermit doesn't take action on anything. So the hermit might see a really good opportunity, but they're like, there's always an excuse for not jumping on it.
Right. What do you think, just a question on that, because one of the other ways I see people procrastinating but being busy doing it is continually developing something. So they're just remaining in development mode, thinking, but now I need to update my website, and now I need to do my brand photos, and now I need better messaging. And there's always something that they need to do that would be better. So they're just not actually getting out there. I always say MVP, like minimum viable product. Let's just get out there and start. You will figure it out. You will be surprised people don't care as much about your brand photos as what you do.
Exactly.
There's all those things. Does that fit into one of those shadow archetypes?
Yeah, it can. It generally fits into that tyrant archetype, which is that feeling everything has to be perfect. Or the lone wolf is about knowledge. The lone wolf is that I don't know enough yet. I've got to do another course.
Right.
I've got to do another course or another study or learn a new thing before I'm going to be ready to put myself out in the world.
And then they change their mind because they're doing a course. It's like, maybe I shouldn't be offering that. I should do something like change it. And so all of the back end work's going on. Okay, got it.
And putting it off. But the tyrant, that feeling of it's not perfect. And they're the ones who redo their website. Like they'll rebrand 10 times in 2 years and they haven't started anything,
Change the colours again because it's not the colour of the moment anymore. And totally.
And it's just a procrastination thing. It really is that I'm too scared to be out there doing the thing that I'm meant to be doing, so I'll do something else instead, because again, it helps me feel like I'm adding value. That busyness is what fills up my world rather than the actually producing results.
Yeah. So true.
And so the flip side of that is obviously the empowered archetypes, which is where we see women at their absolute best. So the tyrant, at her best, the warrior, is a fantastic goal setter. She's setting goals, she's getting things done, she's engaging with all the people she needs to engage with to produce the result. And for a warrior, the key thing there is that I'm getting results, I'm adding value, things are happening in the world, but she's not ego attached to it. So it's this sense if something goes wrong, like if, I don't know, maybe the website looks terrible, but she'll go, you know what it'll do? It really is that get out there, just do something. That my program's not quite ready yet, but I've got a whole bunch of people wanting to sign up. So I'll just sign them up and as long as I stay a couple of weeks ahead of them in developing the materials, it's going to be fine. Yes. So for her, it's the end goal, that vision, the goal is the important thing. And how she gets there is, it's driven by joy. It's driven for, I just love getting stuff done. I'm not inventing a new product because I've got to do it, because I'm too scared to put it out into the world. It's just, there's a need for it and there are people out there who want it and I'm going to do it for them. And then we've got the lone wolf who then, the wise woman is the empowered side of that. And the wise woman is, it's women with influence. You see wise women, very influential in the world but they're really happy about spreading that influence. They don't feel the need to hoard it. They'll share it with other women. So you see them coaching, mentoring, supporting, growing others, giving them opportunities, connecting with the right people to make sure that other people, grow their careers as well. So it's a very selfless sense of influence. It's like influence is great to have, so I'm going to share it with everybody. And, they move away from that sort of hoarding and I've got to hoard all my knowledge into I'm happy to just share my knowledge with everybody because it's a good thing to do. And then you've got your tribe builder who is the empowered part of the, you see the martyr side of it, the people pleasing. The tribe builder just loves people and wants to connect with them and spends a lot of time with them. But she does it again through joy. There's no ego in it. It's not about collecting lots of people, like how many people like me. It's just I love people and want to hang out with them. And then at the very top of the diamond, we've got the sovereign, which is, our sense of self-empowerment. We're self-assured, we're self-empowered, we're self-actualized. We are at our absolute best and we feel that's where that real sense of purpose and values that I talked about earlier comes into it. A woman who's very driven by her need to make a difference in the world in a really positive way. And I found when I talked to women about leadership, one of the key things that came out is how women use power is quite different, because for women, power is for the good of the collective, usually socialized power. We do it because we see a need in the world and that thing is bigger than us. It's not a selfish thing. I'm not trying to be on the world stage because I want everyone to love me or I want them to all look up to me or cheer for me. I'm doing that because somebody needs to step up and do it, and there's a vacancy there that no one's stepping into. Not because I want to be front and centre, but because the work needs to be done.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I'm curious, with these archetypes, I can see so many, maybe everyone listening as well, it's like, I can relate to so many different parts of that. So are we as humans typically one archetype, or are we a mix of all of them? And explain a little bit about how do we use that knowledge and practically and sort of be able to, how can it help us?
So to answer the first part of the question, we are a mix of all of them. Like in the 10,000 plus women now who've done the assessment, nobody's ever come out as a zero in anything.
Okay.
So everybody's got elements of all of them. It's motive driven. So underneath the surface is what are we motivated by? So are we motivated by task? Are we motivated by people? Or are we motivated by influence? So some women will have strong leanings towards one part of it. Like they'll get women who are really strong in that warrior side of it. They're probably warrior, sovereign lone wolf, but the tribe build is quite low because for them it's like I actually don't really feel the need to connect with people. Maybe they're really introverted. Or you get women who are very start that again. And you get women who are very people-centric who, for them, the people are the most important thing, more important than task. So the idea behind the model is that in ideal development, we'd use all of them. And it's really about what's the right style at the right time with the right people for the right reason. Right. So if you're not a natural tribe builder, there's going to be times in your life and in your career where it would be useful to be able to do that. So it's leaning into what would a tribe builder do right now? If I had tribe builder here in the room with me, for example, what would that tribe builder do? And I quite often reflect on women that I know, who've done the assessment who are really, really great at one of those things. And I'll go, what would that person do?
Right.
That model of what would they do in this situation. So it's situational. It's about being able to do all of those things when you need them. But some people are really even across all of them, and some people have quite strong preferences. But I've never seen anybody who scored 0. I've seen some fairly lowish scores. I've seen sort of like 5, that kind of thing. But as a general rule, it's maximum 40. As a general rule, even people who aren't particularly developed across any of them will sort of score in the 20s, that kind of thing.
Right. So do you find that there's a situation where, maybe you have a tendency more towards the shadow aspect of one? Because I can kind of see that they're on a spectrum, right? There's the shadow and then there's the empowered of each one. So if you're on the shadow, and obviously that's the strongest voice in your head with the tendency to lean into that, and then that now you are aware that there's the empowered version of that, and you kind of it, but you maybe aren't as used to activating that part of you. Do you find people get stuck in a little bit of a battle where they're trying to adopt the positive, but then what their natural tendency is sort of really pulling them back? And do you have any strategies or tips on how you manage the internal battle if you end up finding yourself sort of wanting to act in the empowered way, but sort of getting drawn back into the shadow?
And look, there's a lot you can do in that space with women, but a lot of it's about our history and these are learned responses. So we learn them from childhood. A lot of it's about what was recognised and rewarded in your house growing up. So I was having this conversation with a client this morning. We had a great conversation because for her, Tyrant was coming out. She's studying at the moment and she's beating herself up because she only got 93% on an exam, It's like, where did I go wrong?
Oh, no.
And we reflected on her childhood, and she was talking about how when she was a kid, that was the expectation. Like her mum was really strict on, why aren't you doing better? Even when you're doing your best, why aren't you doing better? That was the refrain
right.
from her life.
Never good enough.
Yeah, never good enough. And so that's her framing, is that whenever she's faced with anything, it's almost like she hears her mother's voice in her head, why aren't you doing better than that? And so there's this unpack piece around uncovering that and understanding why we do it, like it comes from a childhood experience. And then being able to work our way through that. It's like, this is my mother speaking. It doesn't have to be my reality right now. Some people have had really significant trauma, and that's something they need to go and perhaps seek therapy for around that. But for a lot of us who've just had, our parents did their best. They probably didn't, sometimes it wasn't great, but they did what they could.
Yeah.
A lot of people have that, just that, that voice in their head that says, you're not this, you're not that. And it's recognizing where it comes from and going, even though I'm hearing this voice in my head, or even though this is what I'm telling myself, it doesn't have to be my reality. I can make other choices. It is that sort of feel the fear and do it anyway. Like, even though I feel like I can't put this thing out into the world because it's not perfect, I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm just going to do it as an experiment. I say that to my clients a lot. It's an experiment. Let's just try it and see what happens. And next time we meet, we'll talk about how it went and see if we need to tweak it. Yeah. And most of the time, the things that they think are going to happen don't happen. Like, it's like if I put this out there and it's not, 100% beautiful, I haven't polished everything to perfection, people are going to hate it. They put it out into the world, 80% there. And for a perfectionist, their 80% is everyone else's 150%, let's face it. But they put it out in the world, they go, wow, people loved it. No one noticed that there was a typo on page 3.
No, they don't. No, they don't mind. They don't mind if your video is sideways when you do something. They more care about what it is that you're saying. Do you know, there's something curious. I know I'd love to hear your take on it, because there is that aspect that you just mentioned, the story of like, it's never good enough, even though she's doing really well. It's like, well, why aren't you doing better? And then like, there's such a subtle shift into a place where it's like, hey, that was really great, well done, but also knowing that you can always improve. And so I'm finding, my kids are, well, my eldest is just leaving primary school, my youngest is still at primary school. There's like this balance between trying to create a positive environment, but also have them think, doing your best is all you can do, and that's great, and that's everything. But there's also, you can always seek ways in which you can improve, and it's that balance of making that a positive thing rather than a negative thing. And I'm curious to hear what your take on that is. Like, can you shift something where maybe you've had that it's not good enough and just feeling like it's negative, into it being like, wow, I did my best, and that's that, and that's now in the past. In the moment it's happened, it's already been and gone. But what can we learn from this now so that, maybe we can actually make our next best, even better, without it feeling like it's a negative thing, but feeling like it's growth. It's
positioning it as learning is really critical, which is what did you learn from it?
Yeah.
So the reward is for the learning and for the effort that you put into it, not necessarily for the result.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fantastic if that result ends up equaling an A or equaling 100% on the test or whatever it is. But it's like, what did they learn from it?
Yeah.
What's been the real learning? Are we improving? Are we growing? Are we moving forward? It's that growth mindset versus fixed mindset piece. And that's often the challenge for perfectionists, is that they get stuck in this idea of a fixed mindset where I'm never going to be any better at it. And if I'm not perfect at it, then I've failed. It's like perfection or failure. There's no growth space in between, which is that how do we, even when something's gone wrong, sitting down and going, well, rather than it was a failure, go, that was really interesting. What have I learned? And what can I put in place to make sure that maybe doesn't happen again, or that I've improved it. I've improved my process or my system or my delivery or whatever it looks like.
Yeah.
There's always room for it to be better next time.
Absolutely.
Even when it's, right up here, there's always room to improve it. But you don't want to get caught up in it's got to be up here or it's failure.
No, that's so true. And I love that. And I think it's also like, sometimes you might think this has happened and it's a failure or a mistake. And, in the moment it can feel like, oh, that's a disaster. I'm now trying to get my kids especially to start going, what was the good out of that? Like where was the thing that has happened? Even though that might've been a negative experience, what's the good part of it? And there always is something, and it may not be obvious straight away, but I think sometimes you go through something like that in order to extract a really positive learning from it that you can look back on, usually with hindsight is always a benefit, and see it and really see it for now. Wow, I didn't see it at the time, but that experience meant that I went in this direction, or I changed something, or I did something differently. And this is now what I was definitely meant to do. And I always think it's so good to be able to take yourself out of those negative situations. And like you say, that the fixed mindset of like, I've been tested here and this is all I did my best and that's it and I can never do better, to being like, you're always growing and evolving as a person. What your best was that day, that was just that day. And what if it can be different? You don't know what the future holds. And it's kind of holding that view of the possibility rather than what was, and being tied to it.
And sometimes if people are very discouraged or very stuck, they can't see the good in it. And they don't have to see the good in it right now, this minute, but there will be down the track. Maybe it's in a conversation for tomorrow or for in a week's time.
Yeah.
And, when I look back on some of the negative things in my life, they've all contributed in some way to who I am today. Like I had cancer, and I've been asked, people actually said, do you regret having, of course you regret having cancer. It must have been awful. And it's like, yes, I do. But there was also, like, if I hadn't had cancer, I probably wouldn't have left my corporate job.
Yes.
That was a real nudge to do something different. Having cancer meant that I was much braver. I took a lot of risks that I wouldn't have done years ago. I've started a business. I've done all these, things like, I still can't believe, I look back on the Archetypes work and go, I was just a person in Hobart who just went one day, I think I'll start talking to women, what was really going on. And here we are with this model, like I said, 98 countries. And the old me wouldn't have done that. I became so much braver because of cancer. What really happened was this, that thought process around, if this had been the end, there would have been all these things that I would have regretted not doing. And you do get that sense that life is just too short to not do the things you want to do. Because you never know. It might be tomorrow or next week or next year that could be the end for any of us. So do the thing you really want to do. And that was so even experiences like that where they've been, pretty negative, it was horrible at the time, but I've looked back on it and gone, good came out of that. And I think there probably isn't a lot of things you can look back on it and go, good came out of it in some way.
Yeah. I mean, the driver that you would have had to do something totally different, right? Because you're like, well, I'm here. And you probably thought, well, I'm going to throw all these doubts and fears to the side because who cares what, whatever's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know. I'm going to do this today. And like you say, that is such a positive. You can look back on those times, really hard personal situation and the amazing good that has come out of it for you. It's just incredible. Ros, if you're thinking about someone who's listened to us talk now, we've touched on so many things. It's been an amazing conversation. What do you think you would love them to remember or recall most from this chat today?
I think the key thing really is that the thing that holds us back most is usually us.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually the shadow archetypes getting in our way. It's usually that learned behaviour, something that we've picked up from our experiences along the way in our lives, which stops us from being the best we can possibly be. It holds us back from reaching our potential and doing the things because fear keeps us stuck. And I think one of the greatest things that we can do for ourselves as well as for the people around us and even for humanity in general is to do the things that scare us, because they're the things that are generally where great things happen.
Yeah.
Is that, the learning zone, the, getting out there and doing the thing, and you find that amazing things happen in the world. And most amazing things that have happened in the world have happened because somebody took a risk somewhere. You don't get amazing from the status quo.
So true. And the future's not written yet, is it? So you're never going to know for sure what's going to happen or whether it will be successful. No one's ever known. They've just decided they were brave enough to start. Now, if anyone's listening who's still in corporate, they're thinking, don't know if this is the right place for me. Maybe they've got a dream of starting something. What would you recommend that they do as their first step?
Look, I actually put together a blueprint for the how to leave your job in 6 months, effectively, called Corporate to Coaching 6-month Blueprint. And that, because what I did was I went, if I was to teach this to somebody else, what would I have done? And I went back to my last 6 months, because I said I had to give 6 months notice, and went through all the things that I did. So I did, at the very beginning, I said, when I go in 6 months, I'm going to start a business. So I started things like, getting a business name registered, getting a website, getting the domain names.
Yeah.
Deciding what it's going to look like, feel like, getting branding done, getting photographs, all those things, getting all my ducks in a row. I started talking to people. I started getting coaching clients so that I was coaching, over breakfast or at lunch or after work. I started putting myself out there more, networking more, going to conferences, speaking, that kind of thing. But all of that was the runway to me heading out of my job, because I never advise people, particularly if you're the main breadwinner in your family, just quitting your job on the spur of the moment isn't necessarily the best thing to do. I mean, there are certainly people who do, and it works. But if you're one of those sort of people who needs to sort of feel like you've got your ducks in a row, something, really sort of start thinking, like, make a plan. And it isn't, I'm going to quit my job tomorrow. It's like, if I were to quit my job this time next year, or if I was to quit my job at Christmas time or whatever that looks like, but then put the plan in place and start doing it. Like, get the things happening, because your corporate pay is the thing that you can use to grow your business in the early days.
Exactly. Yeah. I like to think of it as a side job once you've decided. It's like the business is the new thing, then the job is your side job, and it's funding you while it's starting. Yeah.
Because it does. You can pay for your education with that money. You can go and get accredited in things. You can go and get trained in things. You can, like I said, start getting clients, because then you've got it's viable, because you've got people that you've worked with who are giving you testimonials. It might be they're free to start off with. Work for people for free. Do some mentoring, and then get the testimonials from people who go, you're amazing, it worked, I love what you did. And then you're building your collateral, you're building your marketing. Yeah. And so when you do leave, you've already got that presence. Like I found when I left, I walked out of my job and started my first consulting gig the next day, because once I started to tell people I was leaving, people were saying, oh, let me know when you go, because we want you to come and do this piece of work. So it was all kind of lined up before I walked out the door. And that was the ideal way to do it. And look, I recognise some women don't have that option, losing a job or something like that gets in the way and you have to do it really quickly. But if you've got the benefit of a bit of time, use that time really wisely.
Yeah. Oh, I love the idea of that. So the Corporate to Coaching 6-month Blueprint, we'll definitely make sure the link to that one is in the show notes. So if you love the sound of it, then go and have a look at that. That's an amazing resource that you've put together, Ros. Really great. Thank you. Where else can people connect with you? Are you on social media? What's a good place for them to reach out and just get into your world?
LinkedIn is probably the best place. I've got a presence on Twitter and, Facebook and things like that. Haven't tried TikTok yet. Don't think I will. LinkedIn, you've got my 2 websites. I've got shapingchange.com.au and I've also got womensleaderarchetypes.com.au. Sorry, got through the whole sentence before I started to cough.
You're okay.
And, of course, once you're on the websites, you can always find me on email and, on the phone and that kind of thing through the websites as well.
Yeah, amazing. That's great. Thank you so much for your time and coming and sharing the archetypes with us today. It was a really great conversation. I think a really important one. It still needs to be had, because there are so many people. And I think that, I found as well, women often think it's just them experiencing these things and it's only happening to them, or it's only how they feel, and everyone else is, so confident and everything happens easily for everyone else. But it's just not the truth. So the more we talk about it, the more we share real experiences and also, in a positive way, the great things that come out of it, like your time and what you've learned in corporate are absolute assets, and you can use them in the right way. And it's just knowing yourself at that deeper level that can really help shift you into a positive place, I think, in entrepreneurship as well.
Yeah, and entrepreneurship is such a great place to be, because for me the key thing is having freedom, having the freedom to have my grandkids on Thursdays, having the freedom to travel overseas when we want to, the freedom to structure my work the way that I want it structured. And that's the beauty of it, is being able to make your own choices around what you want to do rather than being stuck in the traditional way of work, with the 9 to 5 or whatever it is.
Yeah, life is too short. Live it the way you want to live it. I completely, wholeheartedly agree. Thank you, Ros. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll look to chat soon.
Okay, lovely. Thank you so much.